Have you ever looked at a map and wondered how a whole region's identity can just flip? Today, we're basically becoming historical detectives. We're going to dive into one author's theory about one of the most dramatic and, often overlooked transformations in history. So, let's get right into the central mystery.
All right, so this is the big question. For over 1,000 years, the places we now call Iran and Afghanistan were these amazing centers of Zoroastrian and Buddhist culture, thriving. And then, poof, in the blink of an eye, historically speaking, they were just gone. So where did they go? What happened?
Okay, so according to the author we're looking at, the standard history books might not be giving us the whole story. He argues that to solve this mystery, you can't just read the lines that are there. You have to find the missing lines, the parts of the story that have been left out.
So what's the first clue? Well, the author starts by pushing back on a really common explanation for mass conversions. He points to Bengal, where some historians say people converted to Islam to escape a super rigid caste system. But he argues that just doesn't fly for Persia. Why? Because Zoroastrian society didn't really have that kind of oppressive structure. So that theory's out, which leaves us wondering, what was the reason?
The author really challenges this idea of a peaceful, voluntary switch by asking this very blunt question. He's making the point that the story of a people just happily adopting an invader's religion, it just doesn't quite add up, does it?
Let's move on to the next piece of evidence, and this is a big one that the author thinks is a key to the whole puzzle, the religious world of pre-Islamic Afghanistan. And trust me, this is where the story gets really, really interesting.
It's kind of hard to wrap your head around it now, but before the Islamic conquest, this area was a genuine crossroads of civilization. I mean, just picture it. Not one single faith, but this vibrant melting pot where you could find Buddhist monasteries, Zoroastrian fire temples, and Hindu shrines all existing together.
And get this, we actually have hard proof of this amazing tolerance. Archaeologists have found these incredible statues. We're talking about figures of Buddha standing right next to the Greek god Hercules, or even Hindu gods like Brahma and Indra. It points to this incredible level of cultural fusion and peaceful coexistence. So this just makes the mystery even deeper, right? If this region was so tolerant and so diverse, what on earth could have happened that was so powerful, so absolute, that it just wiped this entire religious ecosystem completely off the map?
And now we get to the absolute heart of the author's theory. He lays out a very specific and very powerful mechanism that he believes explains this whole thing. Let's break down exactly how he thinks this all went down.
Okay, so according to the author, the timeline kicks off around 660 CE with the conquest of Persia. The armies then move east. Their first crack at Afghanistan actually fails. They get pushed back. So they turn their attention to neighboring Turkmenistan. They conquer it, and they enslave a huge portion of the population. Then they launch a second invasion of Afghanistan, and this time it succeeds. Now you got to remember that sequence because it is absolutely critical to the author's entire argument.
And this, right here, leads us to the most provocative part of the author's whole idea, what he calls a cycle of violence. He argues that the way these lands were conquered and converted had these deep, long-lasting effects that basically shaped the region for centuries to come.
So here's his four-step theory. Step 1. An army conquers a non-Muslim land. Step 2. Mass enslavement of the local population. Step 3. Over generations, these enslaved people and their kids convert to Islam. And then Step 4, and this is the real kicker in his argument, the descendants of these converts become the most fanatical, the most zealous opponents of their own ancestral religions.
And he doesn't just leave this as a theory. He points to real people from history to back it up. He brings up rulers like Qutbuddin Aybak, who literally went from being a slave to founding a sultanate. And he points to legendary conquerors like Mahmud of Ghazni and Timur, arguing they were all descendants of these converted Central Asian groups.
So how did they build their incredible empires? Where did the wealth come from? Well, the author claims that those magnificent cities, like Samarkand and Ghazni, were built largely with riches looted directly from India, over and over again by these very same dynasties.
So this all raises a pretty big question. If this story is even partially true, why isn't it more widely known? The author finishes by giving his take on why this particular narrative is one of those missing lines he talked about at the very beginning.
He ends with a really direct challenge to historians. He asks why, in his opinion, many scholars write in great detail about things like the British looting of India, but they seem to be silent on what he calls Muslim imperialism and the specific brutal process of how Iran and Afghanistan became the countries they are today.
And that leaves us with a final, really powerful question to chew on. If we follow this author's investigation, it kind of forces us to ask, what other stories, what other missing lines could be hiding in plain sight in the history we all think we know? It's definitely something to think about.